Hey everyone, welcome back to the UpLevel Leadership Virtual Live Summit. It has been an amazing day. We've had so many people, or so many of our guest speakers sharing into such a wide range of colleagues coming in here. And the reason I did that is because with all of this global event going on, it's affecting everybody. It's not just one niche, it's not just one country, it's not one area. It is across the line. We are all being affected on it. And I'm glad that I chose to do this week because originally I was going to push it back like last week or even the week before, because I kind of thought when this first happened, I just was drawn and felt compassionate about bringing this information and leaders into it. How are we going to get through this? And to me, the best way to do that is just go out to the people that are making it happen so that we can learn from them and then apply that into our lives. And that's the whole idea. But I'm glad that I actually pushed this virtual live summit back, because right now, I can see just in our home environment, the first week was, kind of, I've been saying the honeymoon. And then the second week is like, yep, this is reality. Third week, it was like, oh, this is not fun. And now the fourth and fifth, and some of you are even into the sixth week, the mental part of it, it is grueling. And I can especially see it, I've got a senior at home and I can see it in the school kids. I mean, like there's a lot more tears, there's a lot more sadness. But the thing is it's kind of like a death. I'm looking at it as almost as a death, especially for my daughter. She's losing out on that last prom. She's losing out on that last skip day. She's losing out on, cleaning up. They didn't even get to clean out their locker. There's a lot of mental our mental health was weak here in the United States and even on a global area. But here in the United States, I can own that because that's where I'm from. But I hope the caviar or the goodness in all of this is that it's going to bring more awareness to the mental health, and that people are going to understand that they have tools, they have the ability to change and bring awareness of the people that are doing it. So I have brought in the best of the best, and Mohammed Sheikh is from Canada, and I am so excited that he's going to be speaking into NLP. I know we've had a couple of NLP people on, but the thing is everybody teaches it a little bit different. And he's going to be speaking on the blueprint to success. So Mohammed, if you would like to introduce yourself, I'm going to just hand it over to you. And if you need to share the screen, and anybody that's watching this on the replay, because Facebook wouldn't let us stream it in, technology, I've heard that they're actually doing an update. So we're thinking that that's the problem. But anyway, ask the questions, because I will be watching this. I will send, if Mohammed doesn't catch it, I will make sure that we pass it on to him. So feel free to ask any questions as you're watching this on the replay, because that's really important to us, that we want to make sure that you are able to, find it. And if he resonates with you, we're going to have links that you can connect with him. So Mohammed, if you'd like to just introduce yourself, I'm going to give you the screen.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for, first of all, doing this initiative and having all the wonderful speakers that you've lined up present, and just really sharing their gifts, because this is ultimately the right time to be doing that for humanity to come together. And I'm just, really privileged and honored to be here myself. Getting into a little bit of the history of, who I am, I'm going to preface. The big thing for me is I have found, and I've sat in a lot of trainings and a lot of workshops and a lot of classes, throughout the years. And I found that it's very easy, for people to just say to you, you need to be more confident in life, or you need to be more grateful in life, right? Or you need to have more calm and patience during times like this. But no one is actually teaching you the step-by-step, the how-to recipe. If I do this, if I do that, this is exactly how you're going to get that state. And, for me, I found in neurolinguistic programming and NLP. Now, NLP for me has been, my thing. I've been in this world ever since I was really 23 years old. So I'm like approaching 38. So, I'm still young as far as, life experience goes. But this has been a part of my life for 15 years. And it was something that came at me at the perfect time when I needed it. And I'm going to get to that story, but I think even as like a young child, and I think most of you guys can appreciate and relate to this, the question that really started all of this, and what I've been kind of dedicated my life into answering this question, or at least giving the resources or giving some answers to this and teaching this to the world and just empowering people, is why is it that the same life event, whatever that is, can happen to two different people? in that life event for one person, whether it's a death of a loved one, whether it's some sort of trauma, abuse, whether it's what's happening in the world right now, as far as this epidemic goes. But when that life event happens for one person, that could be the thing that kind of puts them in a downward spiral of, everything that's wrong in the book, maybe drugs, gangs, drinking, whatever, right? And they just go on this downward spiral. Yet the exact same thing can happen to another person. And for that person, it's the thing, it is the catalyst event that, I like to joke and say it turns them into a TED Talk, maybe 30 years later in life. So that's always fascinated me. For me, my life event was, just to kind of give you some background so you can appreciate this. I'm not trying to brag or anything like that, because trust me, I, like everyone, had challenges in childhood. I wasn't the popular kid. I was bullied. I didn't get the girls. I didn't have any of that. But what I did have was I did really, really, really well in school. If I didn't try, I'd be that kid that you guys all hated probably. If I didn't try, I would come home with an 80. And if I actually tried a little bit, I would guarantee myself a 90, right? And in fact, I'm sort of proud of this. One of my marks in high school was actually a perfect score, 100, right? And that was computer programming. So just sort of got to give you that background. And, that was the one thing that I held on to that defined who I am, in which I got my confidence, my self-worth, my self-belief, all of that. And I had a certain plan for life all laid out. Come first year university, that goes all out the window. And I will be completely transparent, I still don't know why. And after doing this work and working with people one-on-one, honestly, it doesn't really matter why. Because the one thing about your unconscious now is that memory is so false. Sitting in class, I remember one of my teachers said to me that, and one of my hypnosis trainers said to me that, the best way, Mohammed, to preserve a memory is never to access it. Because we will remember certain details, but every time we access memory, we're always going to change it. So whatever I come up with now as the reason, well, what happened, why it happened, it's always going to be a best guess, right? I mean, it's been many, many years. But the thing that happened was I got hit with so much anxiety that I'm sure had I gone to see, any sort of a professional or anything like that, they probably would have diagnosed me with an anxiety disorder. It was so bad that I would physically get sick in my stomach. And I actually thought in the beginning that I was getting sick, and, I'd go to a walk-in doctor and get a note to exempt myself from the exam. So it only happened when it come to tests and exams, right? But when it started repeating, I noticed, oh, okay, it's not that I'm getting sick. It's not something that I ate. There's something about tests and exams. To give you the short story, I tried to do first year 3 times, ended up not graduating at all, dropping out of school completely with, a $30,000 student loan debt. I was going to say OSAP, but you'd only know what that is if you live here in Ontario. But a student loan debt, no degree, no debt. And, knowing my backstory, the one thing that identified who I was and all of my self-confidence was also kind of shot. And so this is how I sort of, started my 20s. And I'll be honest, I worked. I mean, that's the only thing that you could do. I threw myself into various odd jobs. I did everything from telemarketing to, being the guy that calls your house and says, oh, our air duct cleaners are in your neighborhood, so it's going to be 50% off. I know all of you have gotten that call. I was that guy for a while, right? Exactly. So, I've done everything, but, and I got really, really good to sort of fake it. I went out, I had friends, all that sort of stuff, kind of finding my way in the world. But deep down, whenever I wanted to push myself outside my comfort zone, there was always that feeling of, can't do it, I'm not good enough. And where I actually found the biggest benefit was in getting trained in neurolinguistic programming, NLP, because what NLP really is about is, it is a set of tools that is around modeling human behavior. And I want to give you guys a little bit of a history lesson of where NLP comes from, because I think there's a lot of value in there to understand its roots. Because the more I talk to people, especially in the online world, it seems like NLP has become this thing about communication. And yes, it is about effective communication, but it's so much more than that. I mean, there's a reason folks like Oprah Winfrey and Tony Robbins and presidents of America and presidents of the world and big CEOs and all of that, they have learned and trained themselves in NLP. But the biggest thing I think I got from it was this understanding that reality, all of our realities really, and in this case, my reality, was nothing more than the stories that I've been telling myself. And I've been focusing on those stories, and the story that I was focusing on that I allowed and I chose. And that's the thing that a lot of the times I think my job is to help people understand that they always have choice. Now, I didn't choose to have, I didn't wake up in the morning and be like, gee whiz, I want anxiety today, right? I didn't wake up in the morning and be like, gee, I feel like, I'm a worthless piece of today, right? That's not it at all. But understand that I had allowed myself to focus on a particular point in time, a particular set of behaviors that I knew how to do, because emotions are stuff that we do, not that we have, and allowed that to become my entire life story. That in that process, I had actually forgotten everything else that preceded that. All of the wonderful things of, the crazy things I was to do, like riding my bike down sets of stairs and just going through forests and, trying to pop wheelies and all of that sort of stuff, right? I'd forgotten all about that. I was just focused on that one thing. But I think the biggest aha moment about NLP is this understanding that not only did they give you this sort of realization, but what the real brilliance of NLP is that they actually codified it. What I mean by that is that they turned it into a process. They created tools and techniques, exactly as I said in the beginning. If you follow these recipes, if you do this, if you do that, you will get a certain result. So it wasn't no longer a case of Mohammed, you just need to believe in yourself. They actually gave me the recipe on how to access those parts of me that were already inside. Just like, I'm hoping that if you guys are paying attention and you follow along, especially when I do a little exercise later, that you follow along so you'll see how you can actually also access those parts of you that are so useful to you that perhaps, you've forgotten that you have. And that's exactly what it is. As far as the history of NLP goes, what Richard Bandler, John Grinder, and Frank Puslik, no one really knows about the third guy, but yes, there was actually 3 founders of NLP. Frank Puslik was kind of like the Steve Wozniak, right? He was booted out really, really early, and they both, pretended to exist. Why? That's another conversation.
I was going to say, I think there's a story behind the story there.
There is definitely a story behind the story, right? With that being said, what they really created was a set of modeling tools. Right, they created these tools to model and uncover what is the difference that makes a difference in terms of our brilliance, right? They weren't focused. I mean, Richard Bandler was actually a student of psychology studying to be a psychotherapist, and John Grinder was an associate linguistics professor, right? And what they notice is that it's not just external behavior that we have to learn from other people, but there's a whole set of unconscious programming, beliefs, thoughts, values, strategies that also kind of needs to come out. And they created tools to do that. Even as a student of psychology, Richard Bandler, he writes this in one of his books, that he wasn't really, what he found just really bizarre was why was it that modern psychology always focused on why people have problems, as opposed to actually studying those who used to have quote unquote problems and suddenly one day decided not to have them anymore. And they were completely fine.
What year was it that NLP really kind of started to come out? And when they did, was it looked against? I haven't studied the history of it.
So it was, I don't know the exact year off the top of my head, but it was in the late 70s. So all of this happened in the 70s, okay. Right? But it was the late 70s when Richard Bandler and John Grinder really started coming out with this thing called NLP. But the way it took shape was Richard Bandler was actually, as a student of psychology, was asked to do a paper and research on the works of Fritz Perls, who was a German clinical psychologist, and he's actually the father of Gestalt therapy, right? And what Richard Bandler actually did is he pretended to be Fritz Perls. Like he would read all his transcripts, he would watch his videos, he would get as much information, but then he started pretending that he was Fritz Perls to the point that he started dressing like him, adopted a German accent, started smoking cigars because that's what Fritz Perls would do. And then pretending to be Fritz Perls, he would hold sessions in school inviting students to come to sort out their stuff, and he would effectively do therapy. And he was really, really good. You had like a second-year student of psychology, you know, doing phenomenal transformational change work simply by pretending he was Fritz Perls. And that's actually what caught the eye of John Grinder because of being a professor of linguistics. And John Grinder was an amazing guy because before this life, he was actually a spy. And he used to bring in the defectors over from the UK, you know, for the Allied forces over in Britain, right? And guy was a chameleon. He spoke like a dozen languages, could blend in absolutely anywhere, right? And so he understood the patterns. And it wasn't the smoking of the cigar. It wasn't, you know, pretending to be German or any of that. There was some unconscious patterns, and they were able to extract that and have the same success. The second person that they modeled, NLP is really based off of 3 people. The second person, or the initial, right? The second person that they modeled was a woman by the name of Virginia Satir. Now, Virginia Satir was a family therapist, and her whole, you know, the magic that she brought was understanding that everything's a system. So she would go, you know, to work with a family who had maybe the quote unquote problem child, right? Maybe he's got into gangs or drugs or whatever the case is. But she would go and take her metaphorical hammer and maybe hit like the dad with it or the sister with it, understanding that there's a whole culture, there's a whole system that is allowing and giving permission and is necessitating the son to be that problem child, which is really, really important because Jodine, I think you'll appreciate this. In fact, we'll all appreciate this, is how many times have we done something really, really good for ourselves that we've actually overcome, you know, maybe a personality trait that we didn't really like about ourselves. And we've made some phenomenal, you know, we've done some really good self-work and inner work, but then we went out, and because it was unfamiliar to our friends or our family or our loved ones, they almost needed us to go right back down to who we used to be.
Yep.
And that's just because we changed, the system didn't change. And so, you know, when I work with folks, I'm always mindful of that, of giving them the tools to integrate and really up-level, if I can borrow your term, the entire system as well. So Virginia Satir was awesome. You know, a really quick story about Virginia Satir that ties into the work that we're doing is, you know, all of her colleagues had so much love and respect for her. And they used to say stuff like, and you know, sometimes we say this, and this is the point. We'll say this about other people that we admire. We'll say that they will say stuff like this about Virginia. You know, Virginia is just so talented. She's got the touch. You know, she's like magic. And it was genuine admiration and genuine praise, right? But the thing is, what they were also saying, the presupposition of language like that, is, well, Virginia was born with it. She's special, and I'm not.
Yep.
Right? That's her, and I can never be that. And that was the difference that Bandler and Grinder understood, because Virginia, yes, she was talented, and yes, she was special, but it was nothing more than, again, a bunch of stuff that's happening below the surface that they were able to extract. And once they were able to extract it, they were able to also replicate and get the same results.
Exactly.
And the third person, my favorite, and if you are involved at all in hypnosis, he's definitely your favorite as well, was a clinical psychiatrist by the name of Dr. And Milton Erickson, yes, he was a clinical psychiatrist, but he was also a hypnotherapist. And he had more interventions using hypnosis than, you know, using medication. He absolutely used medication when it was necessary, right? And there's a huge merit for times where we need to take medication, right? But the man was a genius. He would speak in absolute metaphors because the unconscious is always paying attention now. And it would, you know, relate and find meaning. And he would just help people, you know, sort out their own issues, because he had this model that you are your best coach, you are your best therapist. And he would empower individuals. It'd be, you know, a funny example of, like, there'd be a man who comes in and complaining of a headache. It's like, it's just, you know, it's been bothering me all day. Dr. Erickson, can you help me? And, you know, Milton Erickson would just go off and like, yeah, it reminds me. And he spoke like this. The guy was hit with polio twice. The second time landed him in a wheelchair. He was paralyzed one side and colorblind, and could only see the color purple near the end of his life. And that's why he also wore purple suits. It was the only color that he could actually see, right? But the guy was a genius. Even with all of those disabilities, he'd do phenomenal change work. So he'd be like, that reminds me of the time when I was a young boy and I was asked to go ahead and wash these windows. But there was this one darn spot that just wouldn't go away now. And I would go and I would just take my cloth and I would wet it and I would just rub it up and down, trying my best to make it go away now. And then finally I was able to take that spot, that bludgeon, that painful spot, and just have it go away now. And it's very easy for that spot to go away now. And as I look outside that beautiful window and I could see the sunshine, I'm reminded of how much greatness and beauty there is to life. And the man would, like, kind of wake up from that little semi-trance and be like, Dr. Erickson, my headache's gone. And I have a sudden desire to wash windows.
Hey, you got to keep the office clean somehow, right?
Exactly it. That's exactly it, right? And I'm paraphrasing that story, of course, right. But, you know, the point being is those three individuals is what, you know, created the foundation of what NLP is. And then Bandler and Grinder took it into business, right? And, you know, it is what it is. They just recognize there's a lot more money to be made in business than there is in therapy, right? And I think what was more important, as, you know, in one of their books, they actually articulated that they were wanted more. They were appreciated more and they were recognized more in terms of the communication aspect. And that's why NLP became huge in the whole communication aspect, right?
Because there was a need. There was a need for that.
Yeah, there was a need for that. And they actually wanted that, where, you know, it seemed very, very clear and evident that the therapy model really wanted to go down the path of Freud, which again is a conversation for, you know, another time. So that's kind of like the theory, you know, the history. And the truth is, NLP no longer is a tiny product. No. Sorry, a tidy product or a tidy package, which is exactly to your point. You can have so many different people who are trained in NLP and they're doing totally different, wonderful, amazing things with it. And everyone is constantly contributing to NLP because, again, NLP is basically the study of models. And as you as you add more models to the mix, you can do so many different things. I mean, people use it. Tony Robbins, you know, he got trained by Bandler and Grinder and he went right into the whole peak performance and is known as America's best motivator. And now he's using, I mean, this is old stuff now. That's like really in the 90s and the early 2000s. He's still doing that, you know, the life coaching stuff, but now he's talking about how to make money, how to build wealth, you know, health, all of that sort of stuff, right? You know, there's individuals who are taking to sports. You know, my focus has always been on personal change and transformation and really like the therapeutic side, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's so many different applications.
I was going to just put a little tidbit in there. If anyone remembers Tony when he first started out, and if you've ever followed him, you also remember that he kind of got busted for having, he started taking the course with NLP, and he saw such amazing results that he put a course together and put it out there and put it on tape and was, you know, and all of a sudden they came back to him and said, you're not certified, because he hadn't completed the certification.
Yeah, actually never did. You're right. And
you know what happened? During that time, I went to my local library, because back then I actually happened to have one, a cassette tape like this. This is actually Earl Nightingale, The Strangest Secret. But if you remember, back in the day, this is how we actually listened to educational products. Anyway, I went to the library and got, it was a big old case of NLP, and they were from Tony Robbins, and I was listening to them and I was getting into it. And all of a sudden the librarian called me and said, you need to bring those back in. And I was like, why? I'm not done listening to it. I really am enjoying this. And she said, we have to have those back. We're recalling them. There's some copyright issues. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So when people say that, you know, oh, that was a story. No, I really experienced that. And that was my first, and I kind of, Tony, I actually had seen him down in Colorado. And this happened in Colorado, actually. And I was at a Dale Carnegie training, and I was listening to that, but I would find myself like literally going out into the hallway and watching Tony Robbins, because that back then, you know, he was just getting started. And so, you know, not all the security guards and everything that's around him now by far, but he was teaching in the next little conference room. So I literally would keep going out and listening to him. So that was, and then like I said, that's how I got first exposed to him. And then I went and rented his NLP, because I picked up a brochure, and I was like, I went to the library and I was like, he had him out there. So there's definitely truth in that story of Tony. So
yeah, so actually I didn't know that story. I knew he never finished the training, and I knew there was definitely some stuff there. Right. But, you know, Tony Robbins, I mean, obviously doing amazing, phenomenal work. And I can't remember if this was me listening to one of his things. It's funny. I actually just got into Tony Robbins and listening to his audiobooks maybe about 3 years ago. Right. So, and I've been doing this stuff for 15 or so years. Right. Or it was, I think maybe he was on a podcast with Tim Ferriss. Anyways, he's talking about something. He's talking about one of his earlier days when he's in class, and one of his fellow classmates has a complete breakdown, right? And she's just, just completely lost it. She's having a breakdown, and she totally could use some love and support and just some resources. And it's time for break, and everyone leaves the room, right? And he's like looking at her and saying, how come no one is jumping in? How come, the teachers, and again, I'm not sure who was in the room at that point, but, how come no one's doing anything? And he talks about that I had just so much care and love and just this desire and passion for her to be better, that even though I wasn't necessarily fully certified or trained, I jumped in. And I think the thing that actually helped was the fact that I actually cared, right? And the reason I mention that is because that actually, so I train, right? And I work with a lot of folks who are, actual, psychotherapists and, mental health workers, and they want to learn NLP because they've realized how effective it is. And I work with other hypnotists and life coaches, and I do these sort of trainings. I have a separate training for them, and I have a separate training for people who just want to, up-level themselves. But in that training for other change workers, as I like to call them, the thing that I stress the most is you have to show up, and it's got to be genuine. It can't be fake. You genuinely have to have like so much care and love. And this, you almost show up as if you had access to a time machine and you were able to go into the future. And the reason I say that is because in the future, if you actually had a time machine, which doesn't exist, but you were able to go into the future and you saw how awesome this individual gets to become, and now you know it, it's not just a belief, you know it because, again, you went to the future and you saw them. That's the level of certainty that you have to show up, that this individual is already better. When you show up with that sort of a space, it is impossible for the person that you're working with to not follow you in that. Right. And that's, and I got that. I heard that from listening to, that story of Tony Robbins. And that's something that was a huge takeaway. And I think has always been key to my success, because even in the beginning, when I really didn't know what I was doing, full disclosure, right? I mean, we're always starting at one point. It was just that desire and just wanting for people to just be better and for all of us to be better. So thank you for that story, and allow me to share this with you.
Well, and I was going to say the other thing, going back to Tony, the one thing that you've got to understand about him, the reason that he is so compassionate about giving, especially when it comes to, feeding the hungry, he had not a really good childhood. Yeah. And, that whole experience of him standing on the porch and somebody dropping off a turkey so that the next day they could have Thanksgiving, that's the reason he made that decision, that he cared so much, and he realized that what a gift that was, that he wanted to do that in turn. And, at first he only fed, I think 5 or 6 people, or 4 or 5. It wasn't a lot of people the first time he did it, but now he feeds millions of people around the world. And, but he had that passion to really care and show up. And if you've ever had an experience with him, you literally, it's transforming, because he literally just cares. And, he was even, I think in the UK or over in Europe, and he had he had a deathly blood disease, and he was on the stage in a wheelchair because he couldn't stand up. And he's so dedicated and wanted to make sure that he delivered, because he had so many that felt the responsibility, and he cared about so many people, that he didn't call it off. That's like when this whole Corona thing, I was actually supposed to go to up with Tony, the UpLevel with him, and 24 hours before the event was supposed to happen, they shut it down in San Jose, California. So it was really a bummer, but that was the beginning of our Corona experience. And like, Tony, he said in 40 years, he's never canceled an event. And so it was very hard for him to come on and say, but that's part of how, this Corona has affected him as well. So I just wanted to share that real quick with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He shows up, and that's exactly, the takeaway for all of us, is that we really have to show up 100% and just really ask ourselves, what is the most, where our values are, what is most important, and just kind of really lead to that. That story, though, in terms of, his beginnings is really the perfect segue. It speaks to that. That was his life event, right? And millions have benefited that he decided to kind of go on the upward spiral as opposed to the downward spiral, right? Let me share my screen really, really quickly for you. I just have a slide I wanted to share. So here we go. So as I said, the question that started it all, why is it the same life event can happen to 2 different people? And for one, it becomes a thing that sends on a downward spiral. And for another, it becomes a thing that is the catalyst for their success, right? And, the title of this presentation is The Blueprint for Success. So in an attempt to really just kind of help us understand, but then I want to give you guys an actual method, a takeaway that you can practice yourselves to be able to get into the states that you need to get into. We're going to learn that as well. But really quickly, so we talk about having a life event, right? And again, this could be anything, whether it's a trauma, whether it's the death of a loved one, whether it's what's happening in the world right now. But what determines our path, whether that's that downward spiral or whether that's that upward spiral, is effectively our response, or said a different way, the meaning that we attach to that life event. So, to give you a quick example, there could be, little Johnny comes home, and Johnny's always used to getting, a big hug from mom or dad when he comes home. But this time he's not given a hug. In fact, he's sent to his room, and he hears his mom crying and his dad's angry and they're yelling. And then, there's quiet, and he hears his name a bunch of times. So that could totally be a life event. But because, Johnny being a young child and very, very egocentric at that age, and he heard his name a few times and he didn't get that hug, and he was yelled at and told to go to his room, he attaches the meaning that it's my fault. It's my fault that dad's angry, and it's my fault that mom is crying. Right now, he finds out later that what actually happened perhaps is that dad lost his job, and he's really angry about it. And the reason mom is crying is because, well, she's worried about their security and their future. And of course, they're going to mention, Johnny's name a bunch of times, right? Because they're, he's their child, and they're worried about his future as well. But even though that's really what happened, and that's the truth, there's that whole emotional imprint that occurs, and the response is, it's my fault. And that could go on and become like this thing of always blaming himself when things sort of get hard, perhaps, and just completely making this story up. But this is effectively the sort of imprints or the meanings we give. There's a really good adage out there, I'm sure you've seen it on Facebook, is life is 10% what happens and 90% how we choose to react to it. So it is our response or the meaning that we attach to life events that effectively creates our outcomes. But then I started asking the question, well, why do we choose to respond one way versus another way? And if I could teach people how to control that response so they choose a response that is going to put them on the path of that upward spiral, a better meaning, well, wouldn't that be useful? And so I realized that before we give that response, whatever that life event happens, is that it creates a certain state. We get an emotional reaction to it. And what we don't realize and what we've forgotten is we actually have choice and the ability to control how we respond and how our state is, right? When we don't control it, when we don't take that opportunity, then we're going to go down whatever path, that we're going to go down, right? And we're kind of leaving it to chance. And I like to be in the driver's seat of life. And depending on our state, our emotional state, that's going to give us our choice of behaviors and the way we respond emotionally to it. So what I want to teach is how to actually access a resourceful state so that even if you are knocked down, you can quickly get back on your feet from an emotional standpoint so that you have the best choices available to you. And if you have the best choices available to you, then chances are you're going to give a more resourceful meaning to that life event, or you're going to respond in a much better way. I know I'm getting really technical and semantic and all that sort of stuff. It's going to be so much easier when we actually just go through the exercise. Now, the other thing to really keep in mind is where do we learn these behaviors? That is always going to be, especially as a child, from well-intending parents, teachers, people that have prestige and authority over us. So for example, if, just using Johnny again as an example, if he's getting bullied in school, what's going to exist in terms of his available choices is probably maybe how he sees his dad respond in a similar situation. Now, adults don't necessarily get bullied, but maybe, dad's returning something at a store and the employee's giving him a hard time. Right. And if he sees his dad, getting really, really aggressive and verbally, all of that, well, how do you think Johnny's going to respond in the schoolyard? Right. Or if he sees dad sort of cower back and just be like, okay, whatever you say, even though dad's right. And of course, kids always know. Right. Well, how do you think Johnny's going to respond? He might just go kind of in the corner and not stand up for himself. And that's a big thing as parents to understand. And I promise you this, parents always call me like, what do you do with my kids? And I always say, I guarantee and I promise this, and I don't make a lot of promises in life, but I do promise you, and you're the mother of 5 kids, so you know this. Kids do not listen to you. They will not listen to what you say. They will learn from how you do, from your behaviors.
Really? They don't listen to you? Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. They will respond how they've seen you respond, and that's the best way. We have the opportunity really to be the best models for our children. Okay, so can I lead you through an exercise? Because I really want to teach everyone. I know we're kind of getting close to the hour, but I really want to show everyone a quick exercise that they can do to really access those resourceful states inside of them.
Yep, definitely. I'm looking forward to it. The other thing too, there's no one behind you, so if you go over a little bit, don't stress too much because we've got plenty of time. So
okay, all right. So let me end. Do
what you need to do.
Yeah. Cool. Have you ever been hypnotized before?
One time when we were in a little cabin down in South Dakota. Like I was only probably 6 or 7 years old, but I remember it.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. Good experience or not?
Yeah. No, it was. Okay. It was.
Cool. Right. Well, the interesting thing is, just for everyone that's watching, right? People have these different meanings or understandings of what hypnosis is and it isn't, right? So, just for everyone, hypnosis isn't mind control, right? If it was, trust me, I would just go to like the bank and get $1 million and right. So it's not mind control, right? I can't get anyone to do anything that they don't want to do, right? It's always context specific. And the other thing is that you're actually fully aware. It is a real state, right? It is a different state. It's not sleep. It's not, you know, like that, even though we say go to sleep just because it resembles sleep because your eyes are closed, but you're fully aware. And I think the best way to describe what hypnosis is, it's a naturally occurring state that we're actually always in, right? We're always in some depth of trance or not. I mean, talk about the Netflix trance. You know, it can be so zoned into a show that my son has to say my name like 3 times.
Yeah, but you got to go like this. This is the new state, you know, because now they
Yeah,
watch it on their phone.
So.
So.
We're all, right, there's a driving trance, right? It's also a state of absolute learning. It is a place of being so absorbed in an experience that we are speaking to our unconscious, not the BS stories and excuses that we kind of tell ourselves that allows us to stay safe. It allows us to get real with ourselves. And the best thing about, you know, the work that I do and others that do what I do is it allows us to not necessarily get into details because people don't necessarily want to always talk about, you know, what's going on with their life.
Right.
Especially if it's stuff from, you know, trauma or anything like that. We don't need to talk about it, right? We can totally do some amazing work. But we're not going to do anything like that. What we are going to do, though, is I want you to just kind of remember a time, and you don't even have to close your eyes, right? Because that's the other cool thing about hypnosis. People think our eyes have to be closed, but we can absolutely do it eyes open too. But go ahead and close your eyes and remember a time in which you felt just so much gratitude, where you were just so grateful to be there in that moment, that with everything that was happening in that experience, you were like, I'm the luckiest person right now, and I'm so happy to be here. Let me know when you have a specific memory. Got it. Okay. Just, you know, how I know, approximately how long ago was that?
It was the birth of my first daughter, which would have been 28 years ago.
Yeah.
And then there's 5 of them, so I kind of went quickly through all of them.
Through all of them, yeah. And that is an absolutely amazing and beautiful memory. The only reason I asked that is because I want to make sure that folks, and if you're watching, go ahead and do this exercise. Just pick a memory and we'll just call it happy, right? And, you know, we can all do this together. But I want to make sure that you have a real memory and not necessarily just kind of like a conceptual one. But go ahead and just focus all of your attention and all of your awareness on your forehead. And just notice everything that you notice as you become even aware of that sensation that's on your forehead. And as you really focus on that, notice if you can become aware of the temperature of the air and what that might feel like. And as you become even more aware of that sensation, you might notice that sensation, perhaps it's moving, or perhaps it's growing, or perhaps you're simply just more aware of it now. And as you focus on that sensation, also notice that you can be aware now of the feelings of your right hand. And it's interesting that even though that hand was always there, you didn't necessarily focus on it or notice it until I made mention of it. And how similar your right hand is to your left hand. Yet it's very different, isn't it? It's that hand. It is its own unique hand. And as you consciously focus on the sensations from one hand to the other hand and back to your forehead, you can also allow your unconscious now to notice what is the loudest sound that you can make out. Notice what you hear. Notice now what is the quietest sound, the softest sound that you're aware of. And as you breathe comfortably, notice what is a sound even quieter than that. And that's an interesting question, isn't it? What is quieter than that? And allow your unconscious now, in a moment, when I say go, when I invite you to take a deep breath in, and when you exhale, in whatever manner makes the most sense, we're just going to pretend that you can float backwards through time and space, right into that beautiful moment of giving birth, of holding your child for the first time in your arms, and seeing that face. So go ahead and take that deep breath in now. Slow deep breath in. And as you exhale, floating into that experience as if it's happening right now. Notice what the world looks like through these eyes and what you see in front of you. Notice the colors and the pictures and what you focus on. Notice what the ears hear, the sounds around you, or perhaps it's just the quietness of your thoughts, of what you might say to yourself. And notice the feelings that you feel. And as you see the pictures and hear the sounds and feel these feelings, notice where this feeling lives in your body. Perhaps it's all over, or perhaps it's in one particular spot. If you were to give this feeling a word to describe it, what would you call it? Say it out loud. Take your time.
Complete joy.
Yeah. And if complete joy had a color, what would it be? First impression.
I see a lot of yellows.
Yeah. And notice what happens when you make the pictures brighter, tones more clear and louder at the appropriate amount. And take a deep breath in of that yellow in. And as you exhale, everything that's not yellow, just let it all out now. That's right. Allowing yourself to be perfectly safe on that chair, always keeping your balance. And just looking at that face and just take this whole experience in. And there's a lot of learnings and realizations in this experience and this exercise, isn't it? For you to understand that you can come back to this moment at any time. How? By one, choosing a memory, seeing the pictures, hearing the sounds, feeling the feelings. You're basically going through the senses. And it's like you're right there, isn't it? Now take all of these feelings and all of the learnings and all of the love that you have and all the gratitude and complete joy. Knowing that this is inside of you, always available to you at your fingertips. Go ahead and bring this all back with you to this present moment with a deep breath in. And as you exhale, floating back to the present moment, and we're just, of course, pretending here. But with all of this joy, think now of just what's happening in the world right now and notice any new perceptions or shifts in attitude that might come up for you. take all of the learnings, allow your unconscious mind to install everything in its proper place, to clear any emotions, any beliefs, any lies that perhaps you are allowing yourself to believe that is not productive, that is not useful to you, that has been holding you back, whether now in this moment or for a while. Allow yourself to release that and replace it with much better beliefs and resources. And replace it with strong affirmations. Notice what you find yourself saying to yourself when you hear yourself saying, I am. I am. That's right. Take all of these learnings, and when the work is done, your unconscious will give you a yes signal. Install everything, delete everything that doesn't need to be there, and replace it with all resourceful, strong emotions. And when all the work is done, and everything's natural as it is for you to breathe, only then open your eyes, coming back to that room with a big smile, noticing the brightness.
Wow. That was powerful.
Right. I always like to say at this point, wait for the aircraft to come to a complete stop before reaching for your overhead compartment.
It's amazing because I'm really good about paying attention to all the different things, and like going back and the warmth of my Chelsea, my daughter. It was amazing because when you said bring in that yellow, the reds and the pinks and the blues, I mean, they started moving, and all that color. So when you really pay attention, and then, in the end there, just, the happiness, that really just started moving. Yeah. And each, it was crazy because like when you said, you might feel moving on your forehead, just before you said that, I was like, I feel like I have butterfly wings, on my forehead. And then you said that. So it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely powerful. No, you're absolutely welcome. And I'm hoping that folks, we're kind of following along and we're able to kind of, do this at home, or if you're watching the replay, doing it on the replay as well. And if you did miss it, the gift that I wanted to give everyone is just a complete, genuine, no strings attached, offer to actually book a call with me, right, and experience the sort of session I've actually been giving away for the past month, free sessions to everyone, just because of COVID-19 and just the overwhelm and the stress, because, we all know, and that's the thing, we know it here, but we need to really internalize it here, is that stress, when we give into stress, when we give into fear, we start making decisions that aren't the most intelligent, right? And we need to be making intelligent decisions right now, right? So I'm going to do my part, right? But that's exactly it, right? And this is the thing. I mean, this is just sort of like a taste of how you can quickly change your state, right? When people come to me and say, Mohammed, and I ask, can you help me? And I'm like, well, what do you want? And it's like, I just want to be happy. I was just kind of proving to you that we can get happiness like that. We need to be more clear. Maybe there's elements in your life that we need to change and we need to upgrade, and, and you have the ability, you just need to access that. But we can change our state like that. And going back to the, that presentation, if you remember, is when you change your state, that is going to allow you to take control of how you respond. Right. And life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond. The other part of that is to get to, just like what you're doing here, which is why I was so thrilled to be a part of this, is because what you're really offering folks at home is access to different models, different ways of doing things, different hows, right? Because there's so many different ways that we can find success, that we can take control of, our future, our path. And education is like the best way to acquire new models, right? I mean, we don't need to necessarily, the olden days, it was that master apprentice, where you had to, become an apprentice for someone for like 10 years of your life, and you would truly come out with that skill. Now we have access to podcasts and courses, and just, so much is available at our fingertips that we need to really leverage that. And, you know, it's okay. I'm all good for it. Hey, myself, like, you know, I've been watching Netflix and binge watching and all of that, but there's a point where it's like, hey, we have a real opportunity. The world shut down. Let's really take advantage and take control of who we want to be.
Right.
The last slide that I want to share really quickly is, you know, there's this whole thing that the map is not the territory in NLP. And what that really speaks to is problems or the limitations that we think are never limitations in the world. They're never limitations in the world. It's always in our thinking, right? And so if we continue to add richness to our map, to our internal model of the world, right, we will be able to make that map rich with choices. And the more choice we have, the more success we have. And that ultimately is the blueprint to success.
Well, thank you. I love that. And I love the thing that I really wanted to bring to the plate and just expose everybody to is we're all, it's not an equal level playing, but we're all being affected by this. And we have the opportunity to make a choice, whether we're going to make the best of it and look at the positive. And if there are some really grinding things that you can't get past, things like this NLP can help you. And even if it's just little things, I mean, it doesn't have to be a major event. NLP has been very helpful. I've used it throughout my life. You know, I mean, I was sexually abused by my brothers from the ages of 3 to 7. And, you know, I could have easily just made a decision that I was going to hold on to that. But most people don't even know that about me because I chose to, you know, work through it. And I'm not saying it hasn't affected my life. Believe me, there have been some parts. But I also reached out, and this is why I was so interested in NLP with Tony when he first brought that out, because I started working. Actually, when my daughter turned the age 3, I lost it and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Like literally I was a wild woman and I could not, I was angry. I was, you know, paranoid and fighting, you know, with my husband. And I was like, what is going on? And that was the age, you know, that I started getting sexually abused. And just that, you know, that mama bear in me came out. And that's when I really started to, you know, get into the self-development and self-help, because I realized that I needed, you know, I could have easily went and got the happy drugs and, you know, said, okay, this is my life. But I was like, no, that's not who and what I am. And so that was my path of, you know, really exposure of trying to, you know, figure out what other means there were to change and everything. We all go through tragic, you know, events. No life is perfect. Nobody has, you know, a perfect life. And even if somebody is handed a perfect life, to them, that's detrimental. They don't get to experience any of the failures. So, you know, I mean, it's like, you just have to, you know, look at the tools that are out there, and NLP has been a very helpful one to me. So I'm thankful for people like you, Mohammed, that have invested the time and the energy to learn it all. You know, I've tried to use it just on a motherly basis and with my kids as much as I can, but I primarily use it for myself too.
And that's huge. And thank you so much for sharing that, because, you know, it just makes a lot of sense. And just to everyone that's watching, this is why I'm so passionate, because I've had my experience. I've volunteered in organizations that kind of do follow like the medical model, right? And the medical model would have taken your symptoms and effectively said there's something that you're doing, not looking behind this underneath the surface at all. And this is what happens is that, you know, there's a part that's still stuck at that age, that still was 3 years old, but has access to the executive functions of a grown woman, right? And that's why we suddenly start doing things that are completely illogical or childlike, because we actually have, you know, a part of our psyche that never healed, that hasn't grown up, that's still acting on information that is no longer true, right? But it feels like it's true, and it sees something that matches that pattern, right? Yeah, of course. I mean, for me, that makes perfect sense. And thank you so much. And I'm so grateful that you were able to, you know, get that process so that it's not a part of your story.
Right.
Right.
Well, and the other thing of that too is, for me, I thought it was really interesting is, you know, here, age 3 is when, like I said, the the craziness came in and I couldn't figure out, but you know, it was our secret. Don't tell mom and dad. So my parents never knew about it. They never, you know, my mom and dad worked on weekends, and I was left home with my brothers, and that's how it, you know, it started. And so it could have been really easy for me to start, you know, processing that and really be angry at my parents. And there was part of that I was angry with them, but it was a secret, so I couldn't tell. So it was more of the fact that I had knowledge, but I couldn't speak it. I couldn't, you know, I couldn't tell anybody that it was wrong. And, you know, I actually had to write a letter to my siblings and my parents and put that out there that it did happen, because I had to address it, because there was a part of me that I couldn't validate that it actually had happened to me because I couldn't tell anybody. So, you know, when I did that, that was an interesting experience as well, because, you know, it was like, you know, the truth came out. But if I hadn't have been able to tell that truth, I would have been a very angry, ugly person my entire life. So.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely beautiful. And that's exactly it. You know, whether you come find me or not, that's not the point or anything. But if anyone's watching this and you feel that there's something inside of you, don't give in to that there's something wrong with you, that there's something broken, right? Anxiety, depression, those are not the bad guys, right?
Those are the symptoms.
Those are the symptoms, right? It's almost as if, you know, we made it the bad guys, but these are functions that, you know, I believe in God, but whatever your belief is, that we've been created with the ability to have fear because it keeps us safe, right? We have been given anxiety because that is what is our fire alarm, right? That we need to pay attention to something, right? Yeah. But if can you imagine my fire alarm is ringing and what I do is I snuff it with a blanket instead of, you know, asking, gee, I wonder why the fire alarm is, you know, because if I go address and find out, and usually, you know, if you're Indian, there's roti on the stove that's burning, right? It's not a real fire, right? But, you know, you address that, you take away, you know, the burning roti and the smoke that is not even harmful, but the fire alarm stops ringing. So you want your fire alarm to be functioning, right? So that's exactly it, right? Do some inner work, do some unconscious work, go to a professional, go to someone local, Google this stuff, you know, and just get it worked on. Please do yourself a favor and do your generations, because this stuff does get energetically transferred to generations as well. The good news is when we get rid of it, it's gone from our entire gene.
Well, you know, and for me, because of my having 5 daughters, I realized that if I didn't address this, that it was going to be passed on and it was going to go on to them. And so, you know, I just encourage people, for you guys to, you know, really just stop and understand that we all have bad experiences. What we're going through right now, we're all going through a bad experience. And even I've kind of referred to it as almost a death, because there's a process with it. And, you know, and like I said, the reactions and the emotions that I see this week versus last week in the girls, I mean, it's getting harder and harder. And especially, you know, I mean, kids are social kids, and to not be around and have, you know, and they're trying to be responsible, and, you know, it's hard because it's like, you hate to see them not be able to do any socialization, but you know, at the same time, it's like, if we don't do our part, you could be in lockdown, you know, 3 or 4 more months because it won't go away, you know, and that's hard to teach them that. But the reason I share my stories is because I just want to encourage people to understand that we can use these tools to make a difference. And, you know, I mean, I'm not saying I'm perfect, and don't even try to go to my kids that I'm perfect, because they know I'm not
perfect either, believe me.
Yeah, but I tried. I mean, I was aware of it, and I knew I could see that there was a problem, and, you know, I wanted to address it because I didn't want them to have to suffer and you know, to stuff it down and hold on to it. And if you think that it doesn't affect you, like I said, I never really, you know, I mean, it wasn't an issue. I mean, I knew it happened to me, but I didn't speak it. Well, one thing, I wasn't supposed to, and I didn't really talk about it that much. But when my daughter turned 3, like I said, that was, the click or the epiphany where, all of a sudden I am just, and I was a crazed woman. I was like, what is going on? I mean, it didn't even make sense, but that was the trigger. When she turned 3, it was crazy how much that affected me. And I'm just saying that as a point of, and I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me or anything like that. That's not the point. I'm just sharing with you that, those are type of triggers that can come up in your life and you don't understand it. But when you go and you start researching and you use these type of tools, you can have a much happier life and make a difference and deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Because in what NLP hypnosis allows us to do is we are no longer looking at that childhood event from the eyes and experience of an adult. We actually allow ourselves to go into that state and heal it at the root cause, heal it right there, and help them grow back up fully healed and resourceful. And, honestly, normally it takes one session, right? Mm-hmm. I know that sounds crazy, but that's it. It just needs to happen once, right? Yeah. And that is the difference. It just puts us on a completely different path and we sort ourselves out.
I've had conversations with, other people about it, and they're like, people that really know me, they're like, I would have never known that about you. And it's because I did go and I did the healing and I didn't carry that into my life. I didn't allow that tragic, my parents were busy. I didn't blame them. They were working. They were trying to earn a living. And that was part of it too, is going back and what was the real situation going on? Like you said, Johnny's name got yelled several times, and so when you go back and you look at the whole situation of what it is and what's truly happening, it makes you, like for me, I didn't hold that grudge towards my parents. Why didn't they protect me? That I didn't use that, that on them, because I knew that they were out earning a living, trying to keep, back in the 70s and 80s, it was tough. They were farmers and, they went outside of the home and started working. And, so I didn't have to put that blame onto them. It happened and it is what it is, but, I don't let it control me. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That message right there is going to help so many people. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate you coming in and giving the background of it, because I think a lot of times people, they hear these NLP or, neuro-linguistic programming, and they're like, they don't understand what it is and how it got here and the importance. And I just appreciate you investing the time in understanding how it works and being able to teach it to other people, because I think it's a big tool. And like I said, I hope that in prayers that the underlying catalyst that will be the blessing in all this is that the mental illness field will get a more attention and it will move forward in a more positive way, because I know, like, even this is telemedicine right here in essence. Yeah. And here in rural North Dakota, like I was talking to my daughter about it, because she works at the clinic. They have one psychiatrist that's been there for 3 years, and literally she is booked up 3 months in advance. And that's one psychiatrist for our whole area. And there's just not enough of them out there, and we need to have more. And hopefully, with this whole thing, that we'll get more monies to be putting towards those people, and people want to, because I'm sure for you, it's very rewarding to see, people getting that aha moment,
yeah, I am so grateful to be able to do this work, because I not only do I get to make an impact in people's lives, but I actually get to see them visibly, because they come into the session with a physiology and a facial expression that looks a certain way. And over the 2-3 hours, they're completely, they're transformed. You see it. They talk about it, they'll touch their face and be like, my face feels softer. I'm like, it is, right? Because they released all of that tension. And, because of this COVID-19, I've been already doing stuff online, right? But I've really doubled down, and we're doing this stuff over Zoom. I mean, you experienced it, just how effective it is over online as well, right? So
exactly,
we're in a really, really great place. You're absolutely right. This work needs to just really spread, and we need to learn it, teach it to each other, teach it to our kids, right? And you're right, the medical community is, you know, listening, they're paying attention as well. I get referrals from physicians, right? Because doctors, they don't want to give meds, right? And they've realized too that it's just a staple. It's not actually fixing or helping anything, right?
Exactly.
There is no drug out there that actually heals anxiety, right? And when you look at the therapies, they're effectively telling them, well, you need to sort of think about the situation, see if it's rationalized and all that. And I'm always like, you know, yes, that's true and that's effective, but where is that how-to, right? You need to first get that emotionally centered before you can rationally think anyways.
Right.
Anyways, I could go on and on and on, right?
I was going to say, I don't want to take up any more of your time here. We've definitely went over, but I really appreciate you so much sharing and talking into this. And anybody that wants to get in touch with you, Mohammed's link is going to be up in the tab so you can contact him. I know you said you put a calendar on that, or is in your link there's a calendar if they want to book it?
Guys, and again, I'm genuinely, you know, there's no strings attached, nothing like that. I just genuinely want to do good work. I genuinely want to help. I block off 90 minutes for everyone. So if you book it, please show up.
Oh, definitely. Okay. Definitely. Yes.
Right. And if you got to reschedule or cancel, that's fine. But just please, you know, actually just don't be a no-show because, you know, someone else could take that spot.
Exactly.
But on that link, there's a calendar tool so you can actually book a time and a date. And actually at the bottom of that calendar, I have made available some of my classes that, and they're absolutely free. I made those available for you guys just as, again, just another resource. There's one on emotional regulation. There's one on foundational NLP concepts. There's one where I'm giving a talk. Just all these sort of things are available for you. No charge, you know, you're not going to sign up for anything. Just, again, we're all in this together, right? And I am very pro-humanity. And this is what we need. This is exactly what we need. So please help me, you know, just spread all of this.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And if they have any questions, even in the replay here, make sure you type them in because I know I'll be watching it. And Mohammed, I'm sure you'll when you get tagged.
You'll tag me, right? So if I'm tagged to the question, for sure, right?
Yep, I will definitely do that. So, well, cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm not going to keep you any longer because I know you want to get probably back to your family and enjoy the weekend and stuff. So have a great day, and everyone else, we'll catch you on the next Facebook Live.
Okay, thanks so much. Good night, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.